radio, remember also that back over there in Iran, Mousavi is the candidate of globalization and free markets. Mousavi wants privatization of the Iranian state sector. So we've got the mantra, deregulation, privatization. The people who support him are the rich elitists of North Tehran. Learn that lesson. Mousavi is the free marketeer. He's the economic reformer. He wants to bring down the state sector and make things worse. So he's got a touch of Austrian school thinking in him, doesn't he? And the opposition to Mousavi is people who say there should be morality in economics. There should be morality applied to economic decisions and not just market fetishism. This is a debate that's gone on in places like Poland and Russia for many, many years. Now, a couple of historical notes now in conclusion. The 2nd of July, take a look in your Farmer's Almanac. You're going to find the Morrill Act, the Land-Grant College Act, passed in 1862. July 2nd, 1862. Justin Morrill, somebody we should remember. In order to be duped by the Austrian school, the precondition is you've got to know nothing about real American history. You've got to know, at most, Milton Friedman's monetary history of the United States, which is a hallucination undoubtedly assisted by the narcotics that Uncle Milty praised so much during his lifetime. It's not the case that you go back and you find, free markets. No, not with Lincoln, not with Justin Morrill. Morrill has got his name on two important bills. One is the Morrill Tariff of 1862, which means for the first time with the Southern Free Trade Bloc out of the Union, it was possible to pass a protective tariff. And the protective tariff was the great thing about the Republican Party. The thing that made the Republican Party a progressive force in the world from the 1860s into about the time of World War I, but even beyond. I mean, Herbert Hoover, you could say Herbert Hoover stacks up against Franklin D. Roosevelt. Herbert Hoover is better on one point. He wants a protective tariff, and he says so. He says, I want to protect American farmers and workers from sweatshop labor, sweated labor, working on cheap land. We don't want to compete with that. We want to keep our internal market as the exclusive preserve of the American farmer. And that was actually better than the Roosevelt coalition in 1932. It's very narrow, you might say, but it's a very important point. So the protective tariff that's got Morrill's name on it is one of the keystones to preventing British dumping until the end of the 19th century and making the U.S. this great industrial power. The other side is the land-grant college program, which has to do then with the financing of the Transcontinental Railroad using public land, that is to say, dirigism, protectionism, mercantilism, producerism, and populism, all of the good ingredients of economic thinking. Now, very quickly, we've got this question of the bank holiday. I want to try to address this. It came up in the past couple of days. You've got some newsletters that are talking about a bank holiday, and the idea that there's some plan to have a bank holiday and that U.S. embassies abroad are selling dollars. To cut to the conclusion, I would say selling dollars is not a sign of a bank holiday. It's a sign of a dollar panic. A dollar crisis may be already in the works, for all we know. The massive rush to the exits to get out of the dollar before it comes crashing down. It is therefore, I talked on Russia today about the idea of repatriating dollars. For example, if Russia has 100 billion U.S. dollars, buy 1,000 hospitals, or as close to you can get, to deal with the problem of longevity, the lifespan in Russia, and the standards of healthcare in rural Russia or rural China. Both of these countries could well invest huge amounts of money in one of the few things where the U.S. is still a world leader. That would be healthcare and the related technology. Otherwise, you look at the U.S. economy, there's not a whole lot where the U.S. remains a world leader outside at least of the military sphere. There would be, of course, other things that you could buy. But let's look now at the bank holiday. What people do not understand is the Roosevelt bank holiday did not close banks. The banks were already closed. The banks had gone bankrupt quite on their own. This was a consequence of the British default on gold. What most people probably never heard of, but it's the main event of the World Depression of the 1930s, the British default on gold, September 21st, 1931. You can read all about this in Surviving the Cataclysm, Chapter 7, Models of Disintegration. In 1931, we had 2,300 bank failures here in the United States, and after that it turned into a rolling depression with the Chicago banks in crisis in June of 1932, October 1932, Nevada banking crisis, February 1933, Louisiana banking crisis, despite the efforts of Huey Long to stop this, Michigan banking crisis then, despite the efforts of Henry Ford. The Bank with Hank movement failed, and none of this stuff was able to work. Walter Chrysler, Alfred Sloan of General Motors, and the Hudson department stores tried to keep the banks open. It didn't work. You had Wall Street then discredited in the Pekora hearings around this time based on what they were doing in the crash of 1929. The New York Fed was on the verge of defaulting. There was a panic run on the Bank for International Settlements. In the last night of the Hoover administration, Governor Lehman of New York closed the banks in New York. The Illinois bank holiday was then declared a couple of hours later. By the time Hoover left office at noon in March of that year, every bank in the U.S. had shut down. You had a chaotic collapse of the banking system. What the Roosevelt bank holiday did was not really to close any banks, but to make that into an orderly and legal process of triage. Some of the banks had to be closed for good. Others could reopen immediately. The middle group had to be helped. What we learned from this is that in the 1932-33 banking crisis, there was no private sector or free market solution. None. It didn't work. There was no Federal Reserve solution. Rather, the Fed was an accomplice in the collapse and disintegration. This was one of their big strikeouts. No state was ever able to reopen its banks. So forget about state solutions. Congress failed, and the failure of Congress was so obscene that fascist ideologues started to agitate for the Mussolini model in the United States. That would have been the Morgan Group demanding a new march on Washington. The federal agencies, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation and others, failed to keep any of the banks open. The Hoover cabinet, this is the backwash of Andrew Mellon, liquidate labor, liquidate stocks, liquidate real estate, values will be adjusted, and enterprising people will pick up the wreck from less competent people. Raving insanity. How many have to die in the process? How many lives are going to be ruined in this devil-may-care approach to the lives of working people? Creative destruction. Sure. The biggest failure is the passive presidency of Herbert Hoover, convinced by Mellon and others, in spite of all of his protestations, that he really couldn't do anything to end the Depression. And in the end, therefore, it took an active president, an activist president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, to deal with this. Now, the cause of all this has to do, again, with this British default. Go back, and you can look at this in Surviving the Cataclysm. Lord Keynes' Essays in Persuasion, September 27th, 1931, a few days after the British had defaulted, Keynes said that the British were going to use gold, the fact that the British had gone off the gold standard and the U.S. had stayed on, for purposes of economic warfare against the United States. Competitive devaluations by the British, the Ramsay MacDonald government. And Keynes writes, on France and the U.S. will fall the curse of Midas, because the exports of France and the U.S. will be so expensive that it's impossible for them to survive economically. So the British, in effect, cast the curse of Midas on the United States, on the French, and on the other members of the gold bloc. So bank holiday would be good. Obama is avoiding a bank holiday. He should declare a bank holiday, shut down J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, and the other top 16, unwind their derivatives. But that's not happening. The whole regime is to avoid that. So I don't see a bank holiday. I see a dollar panic coming sometime in the near future. We'll be back next week. Actually, we won't be back next week. This program will be repeated, so please bear with us. We'll resume the normal programming after that. See you next week, or see you in the coming weeks.